Hello everyone. I'm super happy to be here to talk about generics in PHP. Yeah, it's not a dream, but the reality. First of all, I will introduce myself. You can see Le Puy de Dôme. It's a volcano close to where I live. Beautiful, isn't it? Well, my name is Karim Pinchon. I'm a French backend developer. It's important to precise that I'm French because it explains what my English is so terrible. So, sorry for your ears for the following 45 minutes. Not my fault, my country fault, in fact. All French have a terrible English. So, if you want to follow me on social network, it's KPN13. I write a little blog sometimes, but only in French, sadly, so not very useful for you. But you can find the following slides at slides.com/kpn13. I currently work for a company called Fox Intelligence. We provide a platform allowing our customer to have a lot of data regarding e-commerce, for example, market shares, growth indexes, share of wallet, any KPIs you might want to have. We are useful for our client because we have the biggest, the best panel, the best consumer panel for e-commerce in Europe and probably top world too. So, what's on the agenda? First of all, I will introduce the notion of generics, regardless the language. I will also talk about the main use cases of generics. Then we will look around in the other language, what is done. Then we will be interested by PHP and the ecosystem. And at the end, we will finish by some example found in the Symfony framework. So generics, what is it? Generics allow you to customize the type of inside the class and a method or any interface, thread, and so on. So it's a notion highly coupled to the type system of a language. This allows you to write type code, but without being specifically bound to a type. So you notice that PHP is more and more typed. And this is a good thing because we have more security in our code by typing it. But we are also less flexible. And generics will allow you to have the best of the two worlds. And we can finally think about generics as an abstraction layer on top of type. So the main benefits of using generics, depending of the language, of course, but you wouldn't have to use cast or any documentation. For example, in PHP, the @var to precise the type of the variable. We will be able to optimize and maybe simplify the code. Optimize because generics will allow you to write less code. And we also have easy code maintenance because less code to write is also less code to maintain. And this will this will increase the code security because sometimes we will be able to use type where sometimes we do not already have type. So, but there is also some drawbacks. First of all, it is not a so easy notation, depending again of the language, but we will see that it's kind of the same thing everywhere. And we can ask the question about the performance because it's important, so we will see that. But what we can say is today, generics are a very important concept of any programming language. It's all the time an highly awaited concept in any developer communities. And it could be native in several languages, like Java, for example. Well, let's see the main use cases of the generics. Of course, when we think about generics, we think about collection. This is already the main use case of using generics. So To implement collection, here is a PHP example, of course, but to implement collection, we have several strategies. The first one is to write a very dumb and simple class collection without any type int or anything related to the type. So, by instancing my collection, I will be able to push any kind of object and pop any kind of object. Here, this code could work, in fact, but this is very risky, right? Because I cannot have any information of what I will pop, and I can mess up really easily with anything I will be able to put in my collection. So, not very safe and useful. Another type of implementation, quite smarter, it's called type collection. So at the initialization of the collection, we will set the type of the object that this collection could contain, and then at the runtime, we'll be able to check if the type of the pushed item is really the kind of item we want. So this is really safer, of course. I will be able to push only dog here and no cat. And I will pop only dog, I'm sure of it. So this is quite cool. But it will not be very easy for my IDE and any static code analyzer to know what I'm doing here. So I will not have the help of my IDE and any other tools. Well, the third kind of implementation we can find is an implementation by a type. So here I have a dog collection, and I can type int everywhere my dog object. So it will work perfectly at runtime and so on. I will have the safety of the type and etc. But I will have to write a cat collection and so on. So I will duplicate a lot of code. So it's not perfect. Another use case, very important when we talk about generics, is the factories. You write a simple function or method to build an object, a complex object. And generics will allow us to know what kind of type is $results. As a developer, of course, we know here it is kind of simple that $result will be foo and the other line will be an exception. But my IDE and other tools will not be able to know that. In fact, it's not totally true because for a so simple example, the tools could infer the type from this, but for more difficult, more complex implementation, it will be not so easy. And the last use case I want to talk about is the utility methods. Could be kind of anything. Here I choose two examples, but we can think about any other thing. For example, I have a simple add function here. We can take two parameters and just make an addition of these two parameters and return the result. This can work with integer, with float, even with arrays. And okay, as a developer, again, I will know that the first one is an int, the first result is an int, and the second result is a float. But again, my IDE and any other tools will not be able to know that and to help me after that. So now let's look around what is done in other language. So first of all, which language use generics? In fact, there is a lot of language who already have generics, mostly in native way. So I put only some example here. But Java, C#, Go, Rust, etc. have generics for some times now. So I look for any convention across the language. And what I can say is the first convention is to use later or more generally, a camel case word like t, etc. T value, t my interface is really useful here. And across the language, this convention are repeated. So let's see some example in Golang. So Golang has generic since 2022, so not so so old. So I will try to explain this simple function. This function will just have a map in parameters and return the sum of all the elements of the map. And it could do a sum of a map of int, integer, or a map of float. In the square bracket, we will have our two generics, so k, which is a comparable, and v, which could be either an integer or a float. Then we have the parameters in parentheses, which is m, a map. And this map will use our two generics, so k and v, as the key and the key type and the value type. And this will return a v, so the same thing as in the map. What is important here is all the operation of the method should be compatible with all of the type, of course. And as Golang is a compiled language, if we messed up with any declaration, the compiler will crash, or will not compile. When we want to use our method, we will call the method, and in the square bracket, set the type of the k and the v. So the first one is string, integer, string, float. Now, Java example. Well, Java has generic since 2004, so it's very old. Here, we have a simple box class, which is kind of collection. And we see in the angle bracket, at the definition of the class, a T. So the T is our generic. And then you can see kind of everywhere in the class the usage of the T. Finally, to instantiate and really use our box, we can just set new box, and in the square bracket we will set the type we want to use in our box, and then we will have an integer box. So this box will be useful with any dog, cat, or I don't know what type. Here also we can define generics at the method level, still with the square bracket, the angle bracket, sorry, and then use your generics kind of everywhere. Also now a TypeScript example. So TypeScript has generics since 2012, I think. Here I have a simple identity method which only take an argument and return this argument without any operation. So with generic, we see the angle bracket T. So I define my generic here, and then I can use my generic in the type int or in the return type of the method. And then I can use identity, angle bracket, the type I want to use, so string, number, or etc. Also, TypeScript could infer the type of a so simple method without the angle bracket, but for more complex implementation, it won't be possible. Now, and very quickly, a Rust example, just to see that it's kind of the same thing everywhere in any language, still with the angle bracket and so on. So very quick. So now, how does it work in PHP? Well, sorry. PHP does not support natively generics, as you may know. And And why? So maybe you know this guy. It's Nikita Popov, and he worked a lot on PHP, and especially on the type system of PHP 7 and so on. Now he's kind of on something else, but we owe a lot of of things in PHP from this guy. So he studied the possibility to implement generics into PHP, and he came to the conclusion that it will be very, very difficult to implement it in the PHP. PHP is right in C, as you may know, and the code base is very complex. So also I must say that there is several type of generics implementation. In fact, there is 3 ways to implement generics in languages. So Nikita studied all possibilities and came to the conclusion, and I set some link at the bottom where he writes his explanation and his study. He came to the conclusion that the possibility will be very difficult because either it will be too difficult to implement, only that, because the type in PHP are kind of everywhere, so it's very difficult to make it generic. Or it will decrease a lot the performance of PHP, and I think we don't want that. So, well, there is really some difficult subject here. But maybe you know the PHP Foundation, which is now kind of an organization who led PHP. Well, it's more complicated than that, but you have the idea. And there are some developers, some part-time developers in the which are paid by the PHP Foundation to develop PHP. Derek, just before me, is one of these guys. And I heard that someone he's trying to take the subject of the generics. So maybe we will have someday generics in natively in PHP, but it's not yet. So if we want to use generics in PHP, to have the flexibility of the generics in PHP, what can we do? Maybe we can try to just remove the type int and the type in PHP, but it's kind of a rollback of what we committed during the last years. So here my identity function will work perfectly. I can give it any type, and it will return any type. But some tools like PHP Stan won't be able to infer the type of, for example, R4 here. And so it's not a really good solution, right? How about using mixed? Mixed is a new supertype of PHP. It's kind of the union of all this. So maybe you can just type int and use mixed everywhere in our code. So the same function, but now it's typed. But PHP Stan is still not very happy with this code. And it is normal because in fact this does not solve anything. We can set a value but return a completely different type of value. So this is really not a solution. So what solution do we have then? Well, we have annotation in PHP. Historically in PHP, annotation has been used to add some extra data to metadata to our code for documenting it mainly. And we have some dedicated annotation for generics. But annotation in PHP comes with some limits. Personally, I did not like very much annotation. First of all, the syntax of the annotation are not very I don't know, developer friendly, I must say. No syntax highlighting, difficult to parse, etc. So it's not perfect, but this is what we have now. So, but as you may know, annotation are not used by PHP at the runtime. So how can it help us? Well, thanks to the ecosystem, we will be able to take advantages of this annotation. So a non-exhaustive list of the main tools we can use and use generics annotation is, of course, our IDE, so PHP Storm, VS Code, and so on. Psalm, PHP Stan, Fan, etc. could also use the PHP annotation dedicated to generics. So let's dig into this annotation. Well, the main one is @template. It will allow us to define a generic. So here I define the T generic, and then I can use the T everywhere as a parameter type int or as the return type. So now, still exactly the same identity function, but now let's look PHP Stan, and PHP Stan now see no error here because it knows that if I give an array as a parameter, I will receive an array as the return. No. If I messed up with my code, so here I take a value, but I return an array of this value. So if I set, if I give an integer, I will receive an array of integer and so on. Well, this code will work at the runtime, but maybe not as I expected to. So PHP Stan will warn me that there is some issue here, and only by regarding the annotation. Sorry. So also we can define the template as a class level, or as a trait level, or as an interface level, etc. And then use the T everywhere as a parameter type int and the return type in any function. Everywhere in the class. We can, of course, define several generics. Here I define 2 generics, and then I can use it everywhere. But be careful, because using generics could be difficult to read if there is too many. Well, in my opinion. We can limit the scope of our generic, because it's most of the time a generic could not be anything in our code, and so by using the keyword of, we can define an interface often, or something else to limit the scope of the generics. And then if in my identity function I give it a logical exception, well, $R1 will be a logical exception, and PHP Stan will know that it could be, it is a logical exception. But if I messed up with with the code, I say that T should be an exception, and I give not an exception to the identity function. PHP Stan will warn me that maybe there is something wrong here. So that's cool. Another important thing is the pseudotype class string. So it will allow us to say that T is an object, but an object which is an implementation of the fully qualified class name that I give it in parameters. So $class name is FQCN, and I will return an object which is of the type I give it in parameter. So again, for a factory, it is very useful. So here, if I just give an exception class, so the fully qualified class name in my make method, I know that $he will be an exception, and PHP stan will not see any error here. Without the generics annotation, well, PHP stan will not be able to know that my object, so $e, is an exception. So I will not have, also, in my IDE, I will not have any auto-completion. So for the developer experience, it's very more attractive to have this annotation. Well, before to go in other example, I just set a quick and very basic schema of something. So it is important to understand the other example. So imagine you have a payment mean, which can be defined as, which can be implemented in async payment mean or sync payment mean. And async payment mean could be a bank transfer, for example, or something else. And sync payment mean could be a credit card, for example, again, or something else. So here, we have the @implements annotation. So if I have an interface which uses a template T, I will be able to implement that interface with any other type I want to use. So I define my template T, and then in the implementation, I will use the @implements annotation, say that I want to implement this interface with the type in the angle bracket. And then PHP stan and PHP storm, etc. will know that my async payment mean collection will handle async payment mean. So, for example, a bank transfer. So PHP stan will not see any error, and also PHP storm will give me auto-completion and so on. So again, for the developer experience, it's very cool. If I messed up with my code and I return a credit card, which is a sync payment mean, well, PHP stan will warn me that there is a potential issue here. Exactly the same thing with a class inheritance, but now using the @extends annotation. But again, exactly the same thing. Can you raise your hand? It's okay. Sorry, I thought it was a question. Okay. So here, again, if I messed up with my code, well, PHP stan will warn me exactly the same thing, that I return here a string, and I should return a foo, because I set in my annotation that foo is my generic, is the type of my generic. Now I will introduce two new concepts, which is covariance and contravariance. It's kind of simple, in fact. The covariance is the process to go from a less specific class to a more specific class. And the contravariance is the reverse operation. So maybe you know that since PHP 7.4, we can have covariance on return type and contravariance on argument types. Basically, it means that a child method can return a more specific types than those defined in the parent method, and can receive as argument types a less specific type than those defined in the parent class, the parent method. So here's an example of contravariance. I have an async payment processor, which has a method called process, and which take in parameters an async payment mean. And then I have an implementation, bank transfer payment processor, which extends the first class. So I can have either the first one or the second one. So async payment mean, which is exactly the same as the parent class, or a less specific implementation, which is the payment mean. PHP will be happy with that. But if I try to put something more specific than a payment mean, here a bank transfer in my argument, PHP will not be able to handle that, and I will have an error, a PHP error, which says that I break the contravariance principle. So here, I will use a payment mean again. So by using the annotation, so template, I'll define a generic T, which is a payment mean. And then in my implementation, I will use the @extends annotation and set my generic as a bank transfer. So something more specific. Because I know that my bank transfer payment processor will only handle bank transfer. But in my implementation, I'm stuck with payment mean, okay? Because I don't want to break the contravariance principle of PHP. And with that code, my IDE and any other tools like PHP Stan will know that I will work in my bank transfer payment processor only with bank transfer. So I will have auto-completion and so on. Just a quick thing about PHP Stan and Psalm specificities, because maybe if you dig in some open source library or in your code, maybe, you will see something with PHP Stan, dash template, and so on, or Psalm. This was useful to avoid any mess with the IDE by using @return T, because before the IDE handled properly the generics, it could mess up because the IDE will not say, "Wow, T is not a type, is not a valid type," and so on. So these tools brings this annotation, this specific annotation. But now it's less useful because PHP Storm handles perfectly the generics. So just a simple GIF of that I stole on the JetBrains website. Here we can just see that we can have autocompletion in the for each loop. So again, for the developer experience, is really more important. More cool. So, is it perfect? Well, the first thing we can say that by using the annotation, which I say again, it's are not execute or read or parse or everything you can imagine by PHP, there is no runtime overhead. So for performance, it's completely cool. We have just seen that generics brings in PHP Storm and any other tools have a complete functional coverage of the generics, so it's totally useful now. But be careful, because the generics annotation for your tools become a source of truth. So if you messed up with your annotation, maybe you will have some false warning and so on. Well, I was so happy to remove a lot of PHP annotation and add PHP attributes to my code because of the syntax and etc., autocompletion and so on. But now we have PHP annotation and attributes, so it could be kind of fat. I think there is some kind of debate of PHP generics annotation to be bring in attributes, but it's not likely. It will not likely happening. So, and the other thing I want to say is there is of course no obligation to use generics if you don't need to. So. Don't be scared. Is it perfect? Well, you remember at the beginning of the talk, I talked about the annotation could be simple, but not so simple. In fact, I just dig into some open source library and see and check and search for the most simple method I could find with the most complex annotation I could find. And so this is, I don't know for you, but for me it's almost more complicated to understand the annotation than the code itself. But luckily, in fact, the annotation are not meant to you to be read as developer, but are meant for the tools. So again, it's not so a problem. Well, let's see some Symfony's example because it's interesting to check if the mains PHP open source contributors has embrace the generics. So first thing, I search in the pull request. I just type generics in the field in the search field and say what and check what the result was. And there is a lot of pull requests for generics. So there is a big work to bring generics and to improve the developer experience when you use a framework, Symfony. So in which component we can find, because you know Symfony is a set of reusable components, not only a full stack framework. And in fact, there is a generics in a lot of different components you can take advantage of. So I will only show you some example. Here, an example from the security bundle. The passport class contains the authentication related data. And here we have a function, a method getBadge, which take a fully qualified class name as parameters and return a badge interface. But regarding the annotation, we know that the return of the getBadge will be an implementation, of badge interface, but we will have the concrete implementation of it because of the pseudo class string here. Here in the serializer component, which is a very important one, this one is kind of more tricky. So there are two templates here, T-object of type object and T-type of type string or pseudo-type class string, which represent the same type as the first template. With that, we know that by giving $type a fully qualified class name, we will get an object of this type. Otherwise, we just don't know. So this is how you can have autocompletion after deserializing something. It's not magic, it's because of that. Another example, in the dependency injection component, kind of tricky also. We have a template t-value, which is an array of array or an array of scalar or of scalar. The method takes a param of this template. It returns an array or a scalar if we add the scalar in parameters. Otherwise, an array of array or an array of scalar. Easy. Okay. Kind of difficult, in fact, to read, but it works for our tools. Also, something I didn't say before, there is some built-in PHP class which already use generics annotation. So, for example, a lot of classes around iterators, here is an example with iterator aggregate, but there is more, already use generics. So, if you implement this class, you will have autocompletion in a loop, in a for each, for example. by using at implementation annotation, of course. So now it's time to conclude this talk, and you can see the chain of volcano close where I live. So it's kind of beautiful, right? Generics are useful, very useful for developer experience, but also for the security of our code by using types where sometimes we don't use type for keep the flexibility. It's not native in PHP, and it's not coming so soon. So I encourage you to use generics by using annotation. It's still very very useful. You can do practically everything you want with this annotation system, and by leveraging of our tools like IDE and PHP stan and so on, and because of the very good tooling support. Thanks you to listen to me, and thanks Dutch PHP Conference for this amazing conference. You can go to join in to give me some feedbacks if you want. Be kind with my English, please. I know it is so bad, but I try to improve it. Thank you.